Hello Gaffers, welcome to Gaffer Tapes Championship Fantasy Recordings, where we talk about fixtures, stats and Kiefer Moore. So in today's stream, thanks for joining us by the way. Joel's in charge of all the technical side of it. We've had a few difficulties getting the video and screen sharing at the same time, but thanks to Joel for doing this. And so yeah, on the stream today we'll be focusing on performance bonus and attacking returns using the data provided by FF Stuff. So there's some graphs for us to go through, and we'll be doing a deep dive into last season's data and players that were in Gaffr last season, which the best of which Joel owned and finished second in Gaffr. So I am at Stoke Gaffr, Kyle, and with me again today for the second _Joel8, who has a new Twitter handle. So yeah, give him a follow if you haven't. Second in Gaffr last season, and he's going to teach me how he does so well in fantasy games. So yeah, thanks for joining us again, Joel.
No problem. First of all, I just want to say something quickly. I do apologise for the screen just going off then for a second. I was trying to type in the chat to say about Kyle's camera. Afraid we can't do anything about that. It's the best we can do at the moment. And I realised by typing, I changed the screens. So sorry, we're quite new to this. Just bear with us, but hopefully that won't happen again. And yeah, you'll have to make do with Kyle's camera. But we'll do the best we can, and hopefully it'll be a really good stream. And I don't know if you mentioned, do put some questions in the chat and we'll go through. We'll have 10 minutes at the end once we've gone through all the data to just answer some quick fire questions. So yeah, be thinking of any burning thoughts or questions that you have. Cool.
Okay, so we'll get into it then. And player performance bonus scores, as you can see on my screen. So these are the best players in each position, ranked in order of bonus scores using Gaffr's performance bonus system. So this includes attacking numbers, goals and assists, but also underlying numbers, which are shots on target. It also includes key passes and every 2 dribbles is a point is included onto a player's score for that game. So how Gaffr work out the bonus points at the end of each game is they total the bonus scores for each player, and the top 4 or maybe 5, is it 4 or 5, Joel? The top 4 or 5 players, do they get bonus points?
Yeah, well, it'll be the top 4 unless you tie, I think, on.
And then it's 5, but yeah. The max number of players that can be awarded bonus points is 5. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, the attacking stats are hugely weighted in favour of in comparison to like defensive numbers, like your defensive, your tackle success, tackles completed, blocks, and interceptions don't contribute as much in terms of bonus point scores. So what happens usually is the attacking players get the majority of the bonus points, unless there's a goal draw or it's a 1-0, and then maybe defenders might get in on the bonus. A few wing backs are particularly good for attacking stats as well, so they are prone to being awarded the bonus points. So anyway, that's enough about the system itself. So we'll go into the players then. And last season, as you can see, Adam Armstrong way out ahead in terms of total performance bonus across all of the 46 game weeks. And Jed Wallace and Arno Danjuma are also in high up in the total scores there. And Michael Olise is third, although he's left for Palace now, so he won't be. You won't be able to pick him in Gaffr next season. So in terms of positions, we'll first look at defenders, and Connor Roberts way out ahead, really. I think that's 19 points ahead over the season, to more than any other, 19 points more than any other defender in Gaffr last season. Connor Roberts was great to own when when he was scoring goals from sort of game week 10 right up until sort of game week 40, I think. So right in the middle chunk of the season, Connor Roberts was the best defender to own, and either side you're probably looking at Scott Malone towards the end, Callum Britton towards the end, Jake Bidwell right at the start, and Omar Richards right at the start of the season when Reading went on a brilliant run to get into the top, to get to the top of the championship. But yeah, Connor Roberts did so well due to his attacking returns. So he was the top goal scoring defender from last season with 7 goals. He was also joint for the top assists as well, Connor Roberts. You'll notice Scott Malone is also up there due to his exploits in the second half of last season. And I'll quickly bring Joel in on this, because maybe Scott Malone was a difference maker for the winner of Gaffr last season. Rune Reisanger has Scott Malone in part to thank for the Gaffr crown last season. So yeah, I mean, will you? I don't want to make the same mistake, but will Scott Malone be in your thoughts because of his performances in the second half of last season, Joel?
Thanks for reminding me, Kyle. I didn't need to remember that. Yeah, he killed me the second half of the season. I didn't own him until the last couple of weeks, by which point it was already a foregone conclusion. Rune had done enough at that point. But yeah, I mean, he's got to be in your thoughts. He is a bonus magnet. You look at his heat maps. I had a look at one earlier for the last game of the season. He gets so high up the pitch, it's ridiculous. And he's 6.5 now, so obviously that's a good thing, because if he was probably 5.5 or something like that, he'd be in everyone's teams. And when you've got, in theory, better defences like people from the relegated clubs, he could be someone who gets overlooked just purely because he plays for Millwall, particularly for new players as well. So yeah, he's got to be in your thoughts. I don't think I'm going to start with him, but I think he's got to be in your thoughts.
So Scott Malone is 30 points ahead of any other defender in the second half of last season, when we all thought that the template was already there. There was no points gains to be made. Scott Malone comes out of the blue. A really random. Is he a left wing back, right wing back for Millwall? Left wing back for Millwall. Really random player out of the blue. I think he was 5 million. And he rose very quickly. He was quite consistent, and Millwall were good defensively, but Scott Malone really turned it on in terms of assists and bonus. to go with those clean sheets in the second half of the season, and was one of the reasons that Roon claimed the number one, and that's the last time I'll mention it. But finishing second, Joel, is an amazing achievement in itself. So I'll be hoping to learn from you over the season, and maybe I'll reach the top 10 next season. That's the aim. But yeah, I'll have fun along the way, and that's the main thing.
Exactly.
So Callum Britton is also up there. So Scott Malone got 3 assists, the same as Callum Britton, very high up in the second half as the second top scoring defender, when Barnsley were great assets for clean sheets and had for a while the best expected goals against, particularly in the second half of the season, when Ishmael had found their winning formula and managed to shut out the opposition on a regular basis. And Tommy Smith is up there as well, I think because he was pretty much an ever-present, certainly the most nailed Stoke defender last season, and he would have played in the majority of the games where we kept clean sheets in, which was a fair number, 21 over the season. So he might be, again, a player that picks up bonus points regularly next season. Joe Jacobson is no longer in the division unless he gets signed up. His performances in the second half of last season would suggest that he'd be a good transfer for a championship club. But I think his bonus points were partly due to him being on penalties. So his being able to score from the penalty spot a goal, whether it's a penalty or an open play goal, counts the same in the bonus. Cyrus Christie was also on 52 points in the second half of last season. Andy Yeardom and Barry Douglas, who is no longer at Blackburn, also finished the season strongly in good form. And you'll notice that all of those players that I've mentioned on the top bonus in the second half of last season are wing backs or full backs. And I have a theory that wide defenders are much better to own than centre backs for performance bonus, unless the centre back regularly get on the score sheet from set pieces. So something to bear in mind next season. And on to midfielders. In the second half of last season, Arno Danjuma was top as the only player to reach 100 total bonus points over last season. So Callum O'Hare, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, Alex Mowat and Harry Wilson were also among the top performers in the second half of last season from game 24. So out of those, I think I only owned Danjuma, and that's probably where I went wrong. I didn't have that consistent bonus point scorer in the second half of last season to propel me up the leaderboard. But with this data, knowing who regularly gets the bonus, I'm hoping that it will help me next season. So thanks for FF Stuff for this data. After I don't want to take the credit for it, but so I asked Frank over DM if he could in any way calculate the bonus that Gaffr uses, collating all the metrics that they explain they use in the performance bonus scores, and Frank went away and got all this data from a stats website. So thanks again for Frank. I'm sure you'll find it useful, and if you do, please donate to FF Stuff in the top right corner of the website. So on to, well, firstly, we'll cover over the full season midfielders, and most consistent over the full season were Jed Wallace, Michael Olise, and Arno Danjuma, with a bit of a gap to Ovia Sharia as well. So all of those players last season were regularly in the bonus for all of the metrics that are on the top of the screen. So mainly key passes and dribbles completed, but key passes are worth, in theory, twice as much as dribbles. So you might want to keep tabs on who's at the top of the key passes tables during the season, because it does have a big bearing on the bonus. So Jed Wallace justified his 10 million price tag at start price in the end, and he maintains the same 10.0 start price. I'm just going to turn the lights on. It's a bit dark. So Jed Wallace will be a player that you should consider next season when Millwall have good fixtures. Like Scott Malone, his points come seemingly all at once. I think last season they both went on a run where they had good fixtures and cleared up on the bonus in pretty much every game. Certainly, sort of midway through the season to towards the end. So Jed Wallace is great to own. The bonus is that he's on penalties and all set pieces, and set pieces count as key passes. So you might want to find out who the set piece takers are at the Championship clubs next season. So yeah, they're the most consistent midfielders from last season, and I'll also mention that Jed Wallace was top of the key passes last season by some distance of all the players in the Championship. So the forwards, Adam Armstrong, the top player for performance bonus last season, due to the number of shots, takes, as well as the attacking returns, and again also on penalties. So Armstrong was top of the shots on target table, as well as the number of shots, but the shots on target metric is particularly important to performance bonus. I've mentioned key passes and dribbles, but shots on target are worth the equal amount of points, so they're worth 1 point in the bonus, the same as key passes. So another table for you to look at over the season on who scored, or transfer market, or wherever you get your stats. So yeah, I mean, it tends to be that the top goal scorers in the striking positions, who take a lot of shots, basically get the most bonus. But it still takes a lot of a bit of research to find out who those players are and get them in when they've got the good fixtures, and get them in when they're on top form as well, if you believe in form, So Adam Armstrong is basically way ahead. He's 50 points ahead of the next best forward, and there's a gap between Solanke, Zhao, and the next best. In the second half of last season, so from game week 24 So Adam Armstrong's still ahead, again by quite some distance due to the shot volume and the number of goals and assists. Chris Willock and Lyndon Dykes make an appearance in the top 5. Andre Ayew has left Swansea, so is not an option for next season. But Uche Ikpeazu might be, who's moved to Middlesbrough and is quite high up, playing for Wickham, who finished bottom of the table. So that's second bottom. I think Sheffield Wednesday finished bottom in the end, but Wickham were rock bottom for the majority of the season. So Ikpeazu playing in a slightly more attacking team under Neil Warnock might be even better next season for returns and the bonus that comes with it. But you'll notice that 3 QPR players make the top 20 for strikers. One of those has been reclassified as a midfielder. He is Chris Willock, who is currently in my team for $6 million. And I did a bit of digging on the lineups that Mark Warburton's lineups at the back, right at the end of last season, when Willock found his way into the first team as a regular starter, and he was performing the best of all the QPR attacking players, which is really interesting going into next season because he's only priced at $6 million. I've mentioned that Elias Chair might be the QPR player to own, feeding Lyndon Dykes and Charlie Austin, the 2 main centre forwards, but Chris Willock at 6.0, if you go by performance bonus, is even better value than Elias Chair. So, yeah, that pretty much covers forwards then. So I'll hand over to your screen then, Joel. And I'm sure you'd like to go over the attacking bonus, the attacking returns from last season. So the goals, assists, and penalties.
Yes, yeah. Just give me one moment to set things up. I'll be about 10 seconds, but yeah. So obviously, the reason we play fantasy football is to seek after attacking returns, goals, assists, and clean sheets for defenders as well, but we're not going to focus on those today. So what I've done for this is I have, I'm going to go by position as well, and I'm going to kind of work my way down from the most expensive assets for each position, and just talk a bit about their returns, what they might mean, a few of the little pieces of information that I picked up along the way last season through just a bit of digging as well, because sometimes the amount of returns a player has had over the course of a whole season doesn't tell the whole story. And then I've kind of got a watch list, bearing in mind this is just players that were in the Championship last season. They weren't, so there's no Fulham, Sheffield United, or West Brom players, and there's no players from the promoted teams either, because obviously it's hard to make those comparisons. When they weren't in the same league, basically. So, so we're going to start at the top with the premium strikers. And I've got my watch list kind of broken down into players that I'm kind of currently considering and others that I'll be keeping an eye out for, and just to see if they hit form at any point. Okay. So, starting at the top of the premium strikers, obviously there's going to be some overlap with what Kyle said, because attacking returns bring bonus points, but you'll know from FPL players like Salah, they score a lot of goals, but he scores quite a lot of goals, but doesn't always clean up the bonus because of the big chances that he misses. We may get a similar thing here. So obviously Adam Armstrong, we don't know if he's going to stay, but he had 28 goals and 5 assists last season. 5 of his goals were penalties. Now, something to note here is that his goal involvement then last season was just over half. They scored 65 goals, Blackburn, last season. So Armstrong is almost always involved when Blackburn score. I say almost always, just over half the time. So if he stays, obviously that 11 million price tag is fully justified. I think my impression was, correct me if I'm wrong here, Kyle, but Blackburn didn't tend to perform particularly well in the more difficult fixtures, and they just tended to kind of blow some of the bottom half teams away. Armstrong got
Oh, you've put me on the spot there. I'll have to do some data digging and come back to you on that. But no, from what I remember last season, so Blackburn had a lot of shots on goal in games. They had a high XG, but it didn't convert to many goals outside of Adam Armstrong, who took the majority of their shots. And I think at times he was a bit wasteful in front of goal. I remember Justin Peach saying that maybe when Armstrong is in front of goal, he should look to pass more and not be as greedy, because he can be wasteful at times. But I mean, it doesn't really matter if a player is greedy. I mean, in fantasy football, you want a greedy player in your fantasy team because they take the most shots and are most likely to get in the attack in the goals. So it wouldn't put me off Armstrong having all the shots for Blackburn. It would make him a better asset, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, you want players that are almost shooting on sight sometimes. Yeah, I think I agree with all that you said there. So yeah, next I'm just going to kind of compare the next two strikers on the list, Lucas João of Reading and Dominic Solanke of Bournemouth. And you can see they've got a similar number of returns. João with 26 goals, Solanke with 23. In part, that is due to João scoring 4 penalties. Now, he missed 2 of his last 3 penalties, and then Elise took over. But obviously, he's not at the club anymore. So I messaged CM Fantasy earlier today. He's a Reading fan, to ask him who he thought was the penalty taker. And what he said was quite interesting, actually. He said, Swift has scored 1, missed 1. It could be him because he's on a lot of set pieces, but he would choose Puskás, who's only a 6 million forward, and he thinks that he'll get more minutes this season because of Yaku Meite's long-term injury. He's out for quite a few months. So just a little bit of info there that might be useful. So it looks like João might not be on penalties. But there's a little quirk to Gaffr if you're a new player. I remember quite early on in the season, I captained Pukki, and he missed a penalty. And I was like, oh, this is a disaster. And then I logged onto the Gaffr website, and I was quite confused. I was like, where are the minus points? Unless they've changed it this season, I don't think they have, but there's no negative points for missed penalties. It only affects the performance bonus, I believe. So, the heartache of missing a penalty, you're only losing out on the 3 points for scoring a penalty rather than the 5 points, 4, 5 or 6 points in FPL plus, the deducted points. So it's not too bad. But anyway, back to the kind of comparison between João and Solanke. So they're both quite similar in that most of their returns actually came in the first half of the season. Read into that what you will. You might think players that return a lot in the first half of the season start the season strongly. You might look at the players that did well in the second half of the season and say, well, they are the form players at the moment. So they're more likely to continue that. So for João, 9 of his 26 returns were in the second half of the season, not many at all. And similarly for Solanke, 9 of his 22 returns were in the second half of the season. Solanke, obviously, you've got to think about the knock-on effect of if Danjuma leaves. That might affect. I think that will affect his assist counts. Now, I'm not sure how many of Danjuma's goals were assisted by Solanke, but he is that more of a creative forward in terms of he links up play really well for Bournemouth. And if Danjuma leaves, he was a very direct runner. He was always running in behind. Very direct. He was also kind of a player who'd shoot on sight a lot, I thought. yeah, that will negatively affect Bournemouth, and as a consequence, maybe Solanke at 11 million might be too expensive. I had him in my first draft. I am not so sure anymore. But when Bournemouth are on it, Solanke is obviously a great option. Okay, moving on to the other two people that I put in the premium bracket, the 9 million to 11 bracket. So Kiefer Moore at 10 million, he had the second most open play goals last season. I think Cardiff could improve as a side this season, and they've got obviously a very tasty run of opening fixtures, so he's in a lot of teams. I don't have much more to say on him. I think there will be times in the season where he will be good to own. There will be times in the season when he won't be so good to own. But yeah, he's also on penalties. You'll see there's 4 penalties, only 1 assist, so you're much more relying on his goal scoring abilities, his aerial threat, things like that. And then moving down again, I'll whiz through the cheaper options a bit quicker for time's sake, but I'm going to actually deal with Dykes and Austin together since they both play for QPR. So Austin obviously joined in January, 19 starts, 8 goals and 1 assist. That is just over half, 0.5 goals per 90 minutes that he played, which was the 6th best among forwards. But the strikers above him included people like Pukki and Tony, who are obviously a different level and find themselves in the Premier League now. So that is a good record. But he did get he used to get subbed off at 60, 70 minutes quite frequently. So there is that. But then Lyndon Dykes, if you just look at the season as a whole, 12 goals and 5 assists from 32 starts, 0.35 goals per game. On the surface, that may look a good deal worse than Austin, but any new players to the game, something important to note is that Dykes finished this last season really, really well. 11 of his 17 returns are in the second half of the season, and my personal opinion is that if he continues somewhere close to that sort of form into the start of this season, he is a better option than Austin at that 1 million cheaper. And I do think, on the whole, the Twitter community tends to agree with me on that, because I've seen Dykes in a fair few drafts, but I've not seen Austin in any as yet. Okay. And then we'll just be quite quickly going through the next 3 kind of mid-price strikers. Karoma was injured for a good deal of last season. He only had 19 starts, and kind of around, I don't know, something like game week 10, game week 12, something like that. He hit form, and he went on a really good run. So he averaged 0.44 goals per game. So I'm not going to start with him, but Huddersfield can be quite an attacking team. So I would just keep an eye on him for sure, because he is capable of going on a really good run. And another injured player, Tyrese Campbell. Again, an unspectacular 6 goals and 5 assists, or so you'd think, but he actually only had 16 appearances because he also had a long-term injury, and he's back now. And at 8 million, he could also be a fantastic striker to own. And finally, Cordy Woodrow, 12 goals and 6 assists is pretty good. I think he was overlooked a lot last season. He never entered my thinking once in the whole season. But he scored 12 goals and 6 assists. He had the 4th most returns amongst strikers in the first half of the season, and the 5th most returns in the whole game in the first half of the season. Now, I would suggest, I don't know if Kyle would agree with this, but the reason why his returns went down in the second half of the season was the arrival of DK, who became the talisman up front. And my thinking then would be that if Woodrow becomes the main man once again, he's on pens by the way as well, then he could be a viable option again. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kyle?
Yeah, so as you probably know, the Championship Fantasy podcast have correspondents for each club, and the Barnsley correspondent is a guy called Rob Pick, who you might know, and he basically, I messaged him last season saying, should I own? I think I owned Woodrow at the time. I said, should I keep him in my team because he, even though he was on penalties, he was out of form. He hadn't scored in I think 20 games, and it came to my attention that Barnsley rotate their forwards a lot during games. I don't know if under their new manager that will continue into next season, but that's something to be wary of. So Rob, when I messaged him, he correctly predicted that if Barnsley signed a centre forward, then Woodrow would drop out of the team as a starting player and rotate, and maybe even when he starts, only play 60 minutes, 50 to 60 minutes, and that's how it played out. So Rob Pick was spot on with that, and I'm interested to see how it pans out under Barnsley's new manager. Does he carry on this philosophy of playing this high press 3-4-3 with rotating strikers, or does he play? Does he maybe? I know it's 5 subs again next season up until next year, so it'll be interesting to see.
Gone down to 3
Woodrow.
the other day.
Sorry.
I thought I saw it might have even been yesterday that they were going back down to 3 actually.
Oh, that might be a new thing. I found that out through the Athletic a couple of weeks ago, but maybe it's changed since. So if it's back down to 3 subs, then Woodrow would be more likely to play 90 minutes. Than he was last season, and maybe that will lead to him getting more attacking returns. And at 8 million, he'd be in my thinking.
Yeah, there's some good Barnsley assets, Barnsley Gaffr assets. I feel we've just got to wait and see what happens with them. They're such a difficult team to predict. Not as much of a fan of their defensive assets just because of the price hike, but that's another story. I'll just quickly touch on some of the players that I put under one to watch for the strikers. I'll start with Morris because while we're on Barnsley, he could now get more game time with DK out of the picture. He scored 7 goals last season. One to look out for me. Go back up to the top. Wells at 7.5 for Bristol City. He had a pretty poor season. He started okay. He was in my Game Week 1 team. And he's a proven championship goal scorer. He's got 85 goals. I really wouldn't start with him, but he's very capable. And if this Bristol City team do start to improve under Nigel Pearson, you just never know. He could become a good asset. Another proven championship goal scorer, Jordan Rhodes, 7 goals, 1 assist in a very poor Sheffield Wednesday team last season, playing for a more attacking team in Huddersfield. Maybe he'll get some better service. Colin Kazim-Richards, pretty much the only Derby player who you could even argue is a valid Gaffr asset at the moment. Their team is in a mess, but he scored 8 goals and 2 assists last season. He went on a really good run between December and February, scoring 6 goals. If he can replicate that at some point, he could become an option. And Martin Waghorn got 5 goals and 5 assists last season. Will he be the main man for Coventry since they signed him? He's scored quite a lot of goals at Championship level as well. We'll see. So those are just a few I've picked out. I may have missed a couple of potential gems in there. Sorry, that's in the mid-price bracket. But moving on to the budget options, I've just included 3 here. So Ikpeazu has moved from Wickham to Middlesbrough. They gave it a really good go, didn't they, Wickham, at the end of last season. Shame that they couldn't have stayed up. It would have been a pretty amazing story. He got 6 goals and 4 assists, but he mostly started in the second half of last season. So most of those returns are in the second half of last season. And if he is going to be the main man up front for Middlesbrough, I think he could be a very nice cheap asset, but again, one to watch, especially as a new signing. And I mentioned Puskas before. CM Fantasy thought he'd get some more game time, and if so, 6 million is a bargain for a potential Reading striker. And finally, I put Adebayo question mark. I think they've signed a few strikers. But all the Luton strikers will be fairly cheap. I think they're all around the 6 million mark. If you want the lowdown on Luton strikers, I'd recommend sending a message to Dan Ashby. He's part of the Championship Fantasy podcasts. He goes on there sometimes, and he's a Luton fan. I'm sure he'd be able to give you the lowdown on Luton attackers. So that's strikers. Moving on to midfielders.
Yeah, we might as well give the Championship Fantasy podcast a shout out while we're touched on them. So, if you want to find out more about a particular club and you don't know of anyone on Twitter that you follow who supports that club, get in touch with Jamie at EFL Fantasy, and he'll be able to point you into the direction of a correspondent who follows their club quite closely, and they'll be able to answer any questions you have. But if you have any questions for us, please ask in the chat, and we'll cover any questions at the end.
Well, I'd just like to second what you said about that the Championship Fantasy podcast. They were the only real Gaffr content there at the start of last season, and they were brilliant. I listened to them. I still listen to them pretty much every week. It's really informative, good fun to listen to. Yeah, do listen to them if you can find the time. It's really, really good. So on to midfielders. So again, as Kyle said, Danjuma was way ahead for performance bonus. 15 goals and 7 assists for Bournemouth last season. Another player who could leave. He had the 4th best record for returns per game, 0.8 returns per game. I think I'll have him in my team if he stays. Yeah, everything goes through him, and he was on fire, especially at the end of last season. He was essential for the last kind of 7 or 8 game weeks of the season, roughly. I was a bit annoyed because I got him in the week I got him in. Ruin ahead of me also got him in at exactly the same time, so I couldn't even steal like a 1 game week march on him. But anyway, that's by the by. Jed Wallace, Millwall, 10 million. I definitely don't rate him that highly as an asset, but I think I might be wrong in doing so. He got 11 goals and 5 assists last season. He's on penalties, scored three penalties. I do still think 10 million is a lot for him. I think the lack of a prolific striker at Millwall was something that maybe could have hindered his returns, and maybe if they had someone scoring 15 or 20 goals, then he would be in amongst the assists a bit more. They have signed Benica Phobe, and we can see how that pans out. But Jed Wallace, he's a player that I think I'm always going to. I'll probably never touch him unless he, a bit like Malone in a way. I just kind of stubbornly refused to buy him last season to my own detriment. But I feel like he's one of those players that I'll be really stubborn about. And if he does go on a really
it's only Millwall.
Exactly, yeah. Like, they're not an attacking team. I almost see them like Burnley, but then they're really not. They do. I think they are a bit more of an attacking team than that. But
they're sort of like an Everton.
Oh, don't! Please don't. I mean, you're not wrong. Some of the football was dire last season that we played, but anyway. We're not talking about Everton because it's a Championship Fantasy podcast, Kyle.
Okay, well, you brought the Championship up. You brought the comparison up, so there we go.
Fair enough, I can't argue with that.
Everton and Millwall are like Everton. We'll leave it at that.
From that horrible insult. So into the kind of mid...
So Stoke are probably like... I'm trying to think top of my head. Stoke are probably like Burnley. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
But yeah, we'll go with that. If you play FPL, then there you go. There's 2 clubs straight away. And we could probably go through all of them one by one and make a comparison. I think West Brom are probably Liverpool.
Yeah, probably.
Fulham are probably Man City.
Although I was going to say West Brom might be Chelsea because they're playing a back three, but I don't know.
I mean, yeah, probably. Yeah, Chelsea have got a better league record as well, and West Brom are renowned for winning the championship and getting promoted straight away. Boing boing baggies. Yeah, maybe West Brom, Chelsea. This is completely off the cuff. We didn't plan this at all. So Fulham, Man City, probably. Maybe Man U. Got quite a good history, haven't they?
Yeah.
Of being in the Premier League. So, yeah, we'll give Fulham, Man U.
Okay.
We'll make just going down the list. Sheffield United can be Tottenham.
I was thinking that as well. Yeah. That says a lot about what we think they'll do this season. Playoffs, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the relegated clubs and I can't see them finishing outside of the top six.
Yeah, same.
I think if they make it into the playoffs, they'll be in the playoff final. The one, I think two of them will go up automatically, and the other will be in the playoff final, like last season. I think the same can happen because there's too much quality in the squads.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Anyway, should we get back to Gaffr?
Yeah. Anyway.
So you'll see going on to the mid-range midfielders, I've circled Mowat, Lowe and Powell. The reason I've done that is because they were the ones in that price bracket that really stood out to me in terms of number of returns that they got last season. Each of them got, Lowe got 14 returns and the other two got 15 returns. So Mowat got 8 goals and 7 assists for Barnsley. I, for some reason, have put REA for Reading for that, which is just wrong. Sorry about that. And I've just messed up those 3 teams somehow. So ignore the Reading, Cardiff and QPR for those 3 players. But it remains to be seen what role Mowat will play at West Brom and whether he'll be on set pieces, whether he will be there to create chances, or whether players like Pereira, if he's there, Diangana, the kind of silky players will get more returns. So I think he's a wait and see. I think Kyle, you've had him in one of your drafts, and I think it's tempting because he's cheaper than a lot of the other West Brom players. For me, I think he's a wait and see. Jamal Lowe for Swansea, he played most of last season up front. So once again, he's been listed as a midfielder, which means he's a potential out of position forward. 14 goals, no assists. And he did well at the start of the season, and then he got 5 goals in 7 games in the last 7 games of the season. That was after a run of 16 games with not a single return. So, and Swansea, I don't particularly rate them this season. I'm not sure they'll get the playoffs. They've lost Hurahan, Andre Ayew. They've brought in a striker called Perot, I'd never heard of until they signed him. I'm not convinced by them. And actually, I think, don't get fooled by the fact that he's out of position. He may come good at some point. He may well be. I think he will be a viable asset at some point in the season. But at 8.5, for a Swansea team that will probably not do as well this season, he's an avoid for me. That some people may well disagree with me on that. And finally,
so just on Swansea. So we spoke about them defensively in the last video we did, and we mentioned that. I made a prediction that they would keep less clean sheets, even if Steve Cooper stays. So it's been rumoured that Steve Cooper might leave, which will likely mean that they keep even fewer clean sheets next season. Yeah, but they might be slightly more attacking, so they might score more goals, and players like Pirot and Jamal Lowe might be better options next season because Steve Cooper, for the majority of last season until right at the end, played a back 3 with 2 holding midfielders, and it was quite defensive. They did relatively well. I think they finished 5th. They finished fifth last season.
Yeah.
Got to the playoff final, so it was a good season for them. But just something to bear in mind with Swansea, that the numbers from last season might not equate to the same next season.
I think they finished fourth actually, didn't they? Because they played Barnsley.
I think they finished, fourth. Did Barnsley finish fifth?
Yeah, I think so. I just remember the playoff semi-final second leg was at the Liberty, wasn't it? So Swansea would have finished above.
Yeah,
Barnsley.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, defensive, a bit like England. You kind of, when you think of a very good team, you usually think of good attacking players that score lots of goals. But with Swansea, it was very much the defence that was the reason for them doing so well last season. And that's being taken apart now, with Woodman going back to his parent club, Newcastle, with Mark Gurhey doing the same to Chelsea, and Connor Roberts being out injured as well, even though he was probably more of an attacking player as a wing back. But I think those the two key cogs for them, the main centre back and the goalkeeper leaving, might have an impact if Cooper stays. But it's been rumoured today that he might be leaving.
Yeah, we'll have to see then on that. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So, to keep going then, Nick Powell got 12 goals and 3 assists last season for Stoke. And, Kyle, obviously as a Stoke fan, you'll be able to tell me, would you say the absence of Tyrese Campbell affected his returns? And do you think then, therefore, that if they are both able to stay fit, they can become really consistent returners for our Gaffr teams? What do you think?
Yeah, with Tyrese Campbell fit, Nick Powell will be a better asset, no question. I'm thinking back to the first half of last season when Tyrese Campbell was fit. So they assisted each other a few times. Tyrese Campbell would take the ball forward, and Nick Powell would arrive into the box and kind of take it in. They would take it in turns to be the creative influence in the team and be the finisher on the end of the move as well. So without one of them, you're missing that creativity for the other to finish. They're both good finishers, but you need that service as well. So yeah, I mean, once Tyrese Campbell is fit, he's returning from an Achilles tendon injury, and he will be back once he's fit, which I estimate to be about game week 3. Once he's back up to speed, he hasn't been involved in pre-season so far. Might play 1 or 2 games that we have left in pre-season, and then it might be too soon for him to go straight into the team for game week 1. But once he builds his fitness up, Tyrese Campbell is a great Gaffr asset, no question.
Nice, yeah. Well, you've maybe convinced me to consider Powell in my game week 1 team now. I might have to have a think about that.
Not in game week 1. He won't be fit.
Oh yes, that's true. Yeah, fair enough. Now, when I was looking at this in preparation, when I kind of looked at the rest of the midfielders, it made me feel like even though they're getting the extra assist point and clean sheet point, I'm still going to be going for probably a 4-3-3 a lot of the time this season, because now we've only got a couple of players. Well, if you look at the list, there's still a fair few in the kind of 10 to 15 returns range. But if we go to forwards,
sorry, did you say that you were considering Nick Powell for your game week 1 team, or Tyrese Campbell?
Powell.
Oh, so yeah, so yeah. Sorry, it's Tyrese Campbell that might not be fit game week 1. I got confused.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, Lewis just mentioned in the chat, is it Powell or Campbell that isn't fit? It's Campbell that's returning from a serious injury, so he might not be fit. But once he is, Nick Powell will be an even better option with that creative force of Tyrese Campbell. I think Campbell will play as a right winger in our 4-3. So yeah, he's kind of a creative player rather than a penalty box striker.
Yeah, fair. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll definitely consider Nick Powell, that's for sure. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm feeling quite inspired by a lot of the other midfielders, I have to say. But I've listed a few here that I am looking at. Brooks, I think, potentially becomes a more attractive prospect if Danjuma does leave. I think he'll probably play a more important role in that team, but he hasn't really shown it after his breakout season in the Premier League a few seasons ago. 5 goals and 6 assists last season is okay, but you'd probably expect a bit better for such an attacking team. Chair got 8 goals and 4 assists last season. As Kyle mentioned earlier, he could be the QPR asset to own. I did see Lewis in the chat saying Willock or Chair. Actually, I think we'll leave that and come back to it later when we do questions.
I think I mentioned it, but I will give a quick answer at the end of.
Yeah.
If we touch it on, we haven't got many questions. We can probably touch on it now. So Joe Willock, when I was looking at the bonus points in the second half of last season when QPR were in great form. At the halfway point of last season, QPR were 18th, and they finished the season in 9th. So they halved their place in the league in the second half of the season. And Chris Willock, Joe Willock's brother, was a big part of that because every player contributed, but basically they started to play a front two with a 3-5-2 system, which meant that basically it was very attacking because they only had one defensive midfielder. They had wing backs that got forward. So it was Todd Kane, but he lost his place to Sully Kaikai. And on the left hand side, it was Lee Wallace, who was good for bonus, and they kept a few clean sheets. They were better defensively and going forward. So yeah, QPR are a team to watch, for sure. Going into next season, they'll be looking to take their form from the back end from the second half of last season into next season. But to answer Lewis's question of Willock or Chair, so Willock is 1.5 million cheaper than Elias Chair. So Elias Chair is on set pieces. I think I'm right in saying. But Chris Willock also plays as an attacking midfielder in the same team, and I think they take it in turns to attack. Basically, they play defensive midfielder with two number eights really of Willock and Chair. They're both the same price, so for me, you're saving 1.5 and you're going for someone that's playing virtually in the same position as Chair. And he was better for BPS than Chair last season, and he was Chris Willock was better than Chair, Austin and Dykes for bonus points, and they had similar returns if you average them out over the season in terms of minutes played. So for me, it would be Chris Willock over Elias Chair.
Yeah, I think I agree. Just purely because of the value. Yeah, I won't repeat what Kyle just said. I think he summarised it really well there. I would also just about go with Willock, I think. Yeah. Yeah, so the last few, I think I'll go through these quite swiftly. Billing, 8 goals and 4 assists. If you think of Philip Billing as a defensive midfielder from his time at Huddersfield, then that is not what he is anymore. He was playing as a kind of number 8 and was getting a lot further forward for Bournemouth in the second half of last season. And all those returns, I think, maybe bar 1 or 2, came in the second half of last season. 7 million, I think, could be a bargain if he continues playing in that advanced role. Obviously, Scott Parker has now taken over there. We don't know what system he's going to play, but I think, yeah, keep an eye on him because he could provide value. And then 2 Reading players. I think Reading have some pretty good fixtures to start off the season. Swift and Ajaria, both 6.5. I think I like Swift slightly more because of the fact he's on set pieces. He's going to provide a lot for Joao, I'd say. But Ajaria could also step up in Elisa's absence. We'll see. And then finally, as a budget option, O'Hare of Coventry. He scored 1 goal and got 8 assists last season. In fact, that's in the second half of last season alone. Not bad for a 5 million player. And I'm going to shout out Alfred actually here because I think he picked up on him quite quickly, and he was very keen on having him in his draft, and I wasn't so sure. But the data does suggest that he could do well for a Coventry side that I think were only really improved as the season went on. So that's him. And then under ones to watch, to be honest, there's a lot of midfielders out there that are just very uninspiring. But these are some players that, have it in them to get some returns at championship level and have been in people's teams at times. Willock, I would actually say, is a standout of those 4, actually, for the reasons that Kyle mentioned. But Sinclair of Preston, Watmore of Middlesbrough, and Saville of Millwall are all players I'll keep I might keep an eye out for them for a good fixture run. But in that kind of, I don't know what you think, Kyle, about the kind of 6 to 7 million bracket. There's not a whole load of good options.
There's not really. I mean, in terms of value and what you can do with the rest of your team, probably best dropping all the way down to say a Chris Willock at 6 million, or even lower than that, Joe Ward at Peterborough at 4.5, or there's Alfie Doughty, who has been starting in games in pre-season and is expected to start at least until Harris Campbell returns to full fitness. So Doughty is 5 million as well. There's going to be options. Doughty, Alfie Doughty is in my team at the moment as kind of a placeholder for the first 3 game weeks. But I'm sure a cheap midfielder will emerge. Maybe not a Michael Elise, but a good cheap midfielder that plays in a fairly attacking role for a fairly attacking team. I'm sure will crop up and emerge. And I'll be keen to find out who that is and quickly transfer him into my team.
Yeah, that's the idea. We've got to jump on the right assets at the right time. That's the challenge. I'm just going to shout out some of the options that Lewis has put in. Honeyman, Mighton, and I would butcher that name, Sami Smodic or something for Peterborough.
Sam Smodic.
Yeah. I won't pretend to know loads about these players, but just my initial gut feeling from the very little that I know is Honeyman. I think I saw he had some pretty good stats and has the potential to be a good option. Mighton, I just think of how bad Nottingham Forest were last season and think I'd have to see them, starting to score goals on a consistent basis. And I know nothing about Smodic, but he 15 goals last season isn't bad at all. I don't know if you have any takes on those 3.
So if I can quickly get up my I wrote an article on the new midfielders from the promoted clubs. I might be able to quickly source that and find out the stats that the Peterborough players got. But for me, 4.5 for, is it Joe Ward? Is a really standout player for a player that's got double figures in assists. For 4.5 seems like a bargain. You and I think FPL Duck was very quick to identify him as a good enabler to start the season. But Sammy Smodic, if you want to pay that bit extra, he might be good as well.
Nice. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up midfielders. So
Yeah,
we're going to go on to defenders now. Won't spend very long on this because obviously with defenders you're considering clean sheets as well. But I've just got a few things in terms of attacking returns for defenders. So I've got a little comparison at the top there of the three Swansea defenders: Roberts, Bidwell, and Cabango. Obviously, Roberts got injured at the Euros. We're not sure quite when he's going to be back, but not for the start of the season. 5 goals and 7 assists for 7.5 million. Bidwell 7 million, 1 goal and 8 assists, and Cabango 4 goals and 2 assists for 6.5 million. Now we need to see what system Swansea end up playing. When they switched to a back four towards the end of last season, Roberts and Bidwell had spells out the team, but they're both very attacking when they play. I think they should really be first choice, I would say. They both played in the playoff final. They started the playoff final. But at the moment, I would say they're probably too expensive. But if I was to choose one, just purely, I'd probably choose Roberts. When he's back fit, because the amount of forward positions he was getting into were crazy. I think a lot of people went to Bidwell quite early last season, and then it soon became apparent that actually Roberts was the better of the two towards the middle of the season.
Yeah, better for bonus. I think more key passes due to taking corners and set pieces, which he will definitely be taking when he returns. I think he doesn't return until late November.
Okay.
Due to the ankle injury or maybe Achilles. But yes, it's a long-term injury for Roberts. So not in my thoughts until maybe the next block of fixtures, next available boosts from game 15. So on my screen, if you can just switch back to me. So I've got up the League One stats from last season. So Lewis mentioned Sam Smodics. So I just wanted to look at his season-long stats in terms of League One as a whole. Have you got my screen up?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah. Okay, so Johnson Clark-Harris is obviously Peterborough's forward at 6 million, and I think he's come in at a too cheap a price for a player that scored 31 goals. I expected him to be higher. I don't think the gap from League One to the Championship is too high. I don't think it's as big a gap as the Championship to the Premier League, where you need a full team. I think a new starting sort of a new defence and a new forward line. I think Peterborough will do fine next season. I think they'll be comfortably in mid-table, without any fears of going down due to the way they play and how attacking they are. I was speaking I tweeted today about how attacking they are as the top scoring team in League One last season, and they go forward and they don't care too much about keeping clean sheets. They just want to win games, which always bodes well, I think, for a team that's pushing for mid-table rather than just to draw games and finish higher than the drop zone just by getting more than 1 point a game. So in terms of the promoted assets from League One, then just on goals, Malik Wilks is the penalty taker for Hull, and I think he's 6.5. So we were talking about mid-price midfielders. Malik Wilks falls into that bracket. who scored 19 goals from midfield last season. I think he also takes free kicks as well. Josh McGuinness is the forward, but probably not as good an option, having scored less goals than Wilkes, the midfielder, and 8 assists as well. So not too bad returns there. 27 returns over the season for Malik Wilkes. And I think they're the 2 main players that I picked out from my kind of summary. So I did sort of a Gaffr early gambits article on midfielders and forwards. The promoted midfielders I picked out were Keane Lewis Potter, who scored 13 goals and 9 assists as well. George Honeyman, 4 goals and 14 assists in the same team for Hull. I was quite disappointed that Sariki Dembele is classified as a forward, having played, I think a large chunk, maybe 50% of games last season as an attacking midfielder. But yeah, they only played in the front 2 on 15 occasions out of 42 appearances. So they can play. Clark Harris and Dembele can play as a front 2. They might be the front 2 going into next season. Certainly a very talented front 2 at Championship level. So Dembele scored 11 league goals in League One for Peterborough, with 12 assists to go with it. So Blackpool are probably not an option in an attacking sense anyway, although they were the best defensive team in League One, conceding the fewest goals, and I'm pretty sure keeping the most clean sheets as well. But Solly Kai has now left Blackpool. He's out of contract, so yeah, that's 7 goals and 8 assists taken out of their team straight away. They'll need to find goals somewhere, or I see it being a very difficult season for Blackpool. So Kenny Dougal scored both goals in their playoff final win, but had only scored 1 goal in the entire season. So maybe Dougal was due a goal, as it was mentioned on Not the Top 20 podcast. Very cleverly put there. But we'll see how they get on. I'm not expecting anything from Blackpool in an attacking sense, so I'll probably avoid them. But I'm kind of wary that they might be quite good defensively, and they might not be a walkover. Similar to how Wickham were last season, they were very rarely beaten by 3 or 4 goals in a game, even though it seemed like such a good fixture to play the team at the bottom of the Championship. It very rarely materialised that your forward, for example, would score a brace or score a hat trick against them, and I feel like the same will happen with Blackpool. So I'm kind of wary of that. I have Kiefer Moore in my team at the moment, who plays Blackpool early on in the season, so I might just give him the vice captaincy rather than, I think it's game week 2 that Cardiff play Blackpool, so I'll probably just give him the vice captaincy rather than the full captain responsibility.
Yeah, if Blackpool do turn out to be quite good defensively, I would shout out Luke Garbett. I just know about him purely as an Everton fan. He came through the academy at Everton, only had a handful of appearances, but he's quite an attacking left back. I would say, I know he's 4.5 in the game. He wouldn't be a bad shout if there ever came a time where Blackpool defensive cover was a good idea. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say on promoted assets, or shall I just finish off with the rest of the defence?
I was just trying to find Sammy Smodic. So Sammy Smodic scored 15 goals and 6 assists. So he's kind of in the same bracket as the players we've mentioned so far, like Keane Lewis Potter and George Honeyman is kind of in that ballpark of a good value asset at 6 million in an attacking Peterborough team. So yeah, I'd probably favour Smodics over Wilkes, Honeyman, and Lewis Potter, to be honest, just because he's playing in such an attacking team that are likely to play on the front foot and attack teams, which I'm not entirely convinced that Hull will do every game.
Yeah. Let's see. I hope they can all compete. It's always a shame to see a promoted team just go straight back down. And actually, I thought Wycombe were going to be that team that got battered last season, but they did really well to come so close to staying up, I thought. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's always good to see a team come up and do so well. I was back in I was back in Coventry to stay up last season. I thought they played good football. They didn't play too defensive. They had a go and they took the game to the opposition, which we all like to see. And Peterborough strike me as a team that can do that. Maybe Hull will. They scored a lot of goals last season in League One. Maybe that will turn out to be the case in the Championship, maybe to a lesser degree. So yeah, we'll see. I'm open-minded on all three.
Yeah.
On all three promoted clubs and relegated clubs. To be honest, I'll never rule out a team before game week 1. I'll always give every asset a chance from game week 1 because there's always a chance that a player that you might not expect to be an asset in fantasy turns out to be one. Thinking back to last season, Philip Billing stepped up, playing in a more attacking role as kind of a number 8, and I never got him into my team and maybe missed a trick there, but I've learned from that, and if ever, similar to Ilkay Gundogan, really, in going back to the Premier League, if a player is definitely playing in a more advanced role, they're worth taking a punt on because the goals are expected to flow. So yeah, never be close-minded to any assets in Gaffr,
especially before game week 1 in any fantasy game.
Especially not. That's a lesson there. So
definitely.
We'll learn a lot. We'll learn a few lessons over the season, I'm sure. But that's one that I've learned. I was quite happy with how my season went, but looking back, there's always ways to improve, and that's definitely one.
Yeah, for sure. Can't get them all right with all the hundreds of decisions we have to make with our fantasy teams every year. All part of the fun. Yeah. So, I'll just finish off then. I've just basically found the defenders that got the most attacking returns. Like I said before, you've got to assess clean sheets as well, half clean sheets, bonus, all those sorts of things. But defenders that were good for attacking returns. So I've talked about the Swansea guys. Malone, who we talked about right at the start, 5 goals and 2 assists. He's nailed down that left wing back spot in the second half of the season, and he killed me definitely in the second half of last season. So don't overlook him because of his price. I'm not going to start with him, but I am very wary that if he starts to go off and starts returning in the first few weeks of the season, I may have to get onto him because he was fantastic last season. He was so good for bonus as well. I just knew every time he nabbed a goal, he was on for at least a half clean sheet. Plus, I swear he got 4 bonus pretty much every time he scored. So I knew I was on for double digits against me, double digits for Rooney in those moments. So yeah. Often when he returns big. Okay, and then I've got the 2 Huddersfield wingbacks, Pippa and Toffolo. Toffolo was in quite a few teams in the first half of the season, 2 goals, 5 assists, and Pippa 1 goal, 4 assists. They could be quite attacking wing backs this season, but Huddersfield conceded a lot of goals. So you're not looking at getting that many clean sheet points. So they're an avoid for me, but if they do look to tighten up or they show similar signs next season, then they are potential options, especially Pippa being only 5 million as well. And then beyond that, I've just written a list of the defenders that got over 4 goals or more, or 4 assists or more. Because when you start getting down to, this player got 2 goals this season, it might be 2 headers from the set piece or whatever, there's not a lot you can really say about it. It's a bit random. For example, centre back returns and goals can be fairly random, but there are some players that stand out because they have that extra threat. So, for example, Morrison of Cardiff scoring 5 goals, I caught probably 3 of those, at least 2 of those goals, maybe 3 in my team last season, which was amazing. He is the target. I think they take long throws as well, but corners, free kicks, any set piece, Morrison is one of the guys that they target with their deliveries. He's so good in the air. And at 6 million, quite expensive, and we talked about this on the last video, comparing him to Flinton and G. I think I would rather save the money personally, but he is the one with the greatest goal threat of all of them, I would say. Hellick of Barnsley, another player who's probably sought after actually, and it wouldn't surprise me if he left Barnsley. Rob Pick thought he might leave actually when I spoke to him a few days ago. But he also got 5 goals, another threat from set pieces. And then the other defenders to score 4 goals, Morrison of Reading, Mark Roberts of Birmingham, and we've talked about Cabango and Dean of Birmingham. So, just names to draw your attention to. I'm not particularly suggesting that you put any of those in your Game Week 1 team at all, but if you're looking for defenders with goal threat, those are the guys that showed that they can get on the score sheet last season. And assists, we talked about Bidban Roberts and Toffolo, and Pippa. The other defenders that got 4 more assists that are still in the game, obviously excluding the promoted clubs, are Anderson of Barnsley, which surprises me because he's a centre-half. Probably knockdowns for Hellick or something, I'm not sure, flick-ons. Jeff Cameron of QPR, the veteran, and Lloyd Kelly of Bournemouth. Again, read into that what you will. When you get to this point, if defenders are getting 2, 3, 4 assists, I don't think you can say too much, and I think you should be valuing their clean sheet potential. For players like this, it's only really I think it's only really your Roberts, your Bidwells, your Malones, that a bit like in FPL, your Trent Alexander-Arnolds, that the defenders that quite clearly get a lot more than your average amount of attacking returns for a defender. Any player that just chips in with the odd one here or there, I would think more about their clean sheet potential. So that's it for defenders, and that's it for my kind of dive into the attacking returns. So yeah, over to you, Kyle, for anything else you'd like to talk about now before we finish.
Okay, yeah, just to finish off on, you talked about comparing Perry and G with Sean Morrison. I think it's a good comparison, and I think we both came to the conclusion before the last video that Perry and G was better value compared to Sean Morrison. Perry and G is good for assists and baseline bonus. So he could, in theory, outscore Sean Morrison in some games for 1 million less. But if we go back onto my screen, Joel.
Yeah, you're there.
Okay, so I compared. So I went on went on FBref, which is a great reference point for comparing any player's data over their career. I compared Aidan Flint with Sean Morrison. Again, Aidan Flint is 1 million less than Sean Morrison's 6.0. So Aidan Flint, Sean Morrison's centre-back partner, who played in a back three once Mick McCarthy took over at Cardiff in the second half of last season. As you can see, their career records, although they played in different leagues in parts of their career, Sean Morrison played a season in the Premier League for Cardiff. Aidan Flint played a few seasons at League One level. So maybe that should be considered as a caveat. But comparing the stats over their careers, they're both very commanding in the box. And yeah, as I've mentioned, to Simmet to win it, a new player to Gaffr from the CM Fantasy community. I'm sure there'll be a few others that take up Gaffr from that community, you know, as well as from the FPL community. But I pointed Aidan Flint out as potentially being better value for near enough the same attacking returns. To me, over their careers, the records are almost identical in terms of goal scoring. So yeah, and having spoken briefly about CM Fantasy, so Championship Fantasy is the game that took over from sort of normal FPL, let's say. So the creators of that game.
Do you mean Champman?
So Champman, yeah, Championship Manager, FPL. So that game started during lockdown, when we couldn't play FPL, and two guys from the FPL community decided to start up a new game, which started off as spreadsheets. James O'Lapron basically was in charge of the spreadsheets for that game, and it took off, and it was a major hit over lockdown when we had nothing to do. Myself and Joel played Champman FPL and really enjoyed it. But basically, my point is that without Champman FPL, there wouldn't be Gaffr, because the two guys that worked on the website for Champman FPL, Sean and Joe, they did great work on Champman, and they learned how to set up a fantasy game using Google spreadsheets, which is, you know, pretty impressive.
Astonishing. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing, and to be able to do that just with the two of them, with the help of someone who is Lordy Leroy, I should shout out as well, who did the data side of the website, and compiled all the data from screenshots. Lordy Leroy on Twitter, at Lordy Leroy on Twitter, at James O'Lapron on Twitter, and yeah, Sean Kaminsky as well, who you know, is more of the development, the web development side of Gaffr. So Sean and Joe set up Gaffr before the start of last season, following on from the success of their website in Champman FPL. So yeah, big shout out to them. I hope they continue to progress and develop Gaffr as they have done. They've done, you know, great work, and we're all very appreciative of the Gaffr website, which is free for all, and it is without it we wouldn't have this community, we wouldn't have this channel. So yeah, big shout out and a big thanks to Sean and Joe. So other housekeeping then. So So we both met from the group chats that FPL Thomas from Man on FPL podcast set up at the start of last season. So the Man on podcast were one of the first to get involved in the community, along with the Championship Fantasy podcast. So we were both in an illustrious group chat last season, and during lockdown, it was a great release for me, something to do to stop me getting bored, and met some great people along the way. A few of them in this chat tonight, and we're hoping that the group chats continue. They've been a great source of information last season. I'm sure, Joel, you wouldn't have finished second without the Man on group chats that you were part of.
100%. Yeah. The things like injury updates and all that sort of thing. It's really, really helpful for all that sort of thing. Yeah, team news and just general chatting and giving your own opinions and bouncing ideas off each other. Yes, actually, if you're not in a Gaffr group chat, do send FPL Thomas a message and he'll add you to one, because they really do help, and you do meet some great people along the way, as Carl said.
Yeah, so 10 of the top 30 actually from Gaffr last season were in the same group chat as me and Joel, which is, I'm sure you'll agree, quite impressive. A ratio from just a couple of group chats. It started off as one and branched out into two, and now it's 3 group chats, all with a selection of different people who were keen to get involved in Gaffr as more as less casual Gaffr managers, and we're seeing more and more people like Lewis and Alfred and other people in the chat tonight who are keen to get going next season in the second season of Gaffr. So yeah, if you want to get into one of these group chats to get a lot of value out of team news and injury updates and anything tactical, I'm sure I'll help you with any lineups or tactics if you're unsure on who's playing. Get in touch with @FPL Thomas on Twitter, who manages the 3 group chats. So yeah, I'm still on the subject of community, the Gaffr community. If you want to get involved in the Gaffr tapes, please give me a DM at Stoke Gaffr. So we're doing streams next season. I won't have time to dedicate every single game week doing a deadline stream and a score update stream. I just don't have time, and Joel doesn't as well. We're not James Linden, unfortunately. The audience isn't quite. The audience isn't quite there for Gaffr just yet. But we're hoping in future we'll leave our day jobs and do this full time.
That'd be great, actually.
But that's not why we're here. That's not why we're here. So yeah, if you want to sign up for our Patreon, we're doing this for the community. We're doing this to build on what Manon, what Gaffr themselves and the Championship Fantasy podcast have started from season 1. So yeah, if you want to get involved in the channel and help us out producing content, we're hoping to do deadline streams, like you see on Planet FPL. If we can score updates, please get involved in those. I'm sure there'll be a lot of fun, and we'll have a laugh along the way, finding out these points, and be good to get live score updates from the website on a stream. We can talk in more detail about our teams, maybe as well as group chats, and form a bigger community, a more close knit community. That's what we all want with Gaffr. It was great to have with Champman. I know a few of the lads now play Gaffr who played Champman and are involved in that community while it was still going. Maybe it will continue, but Gaffr is there to fill the fantasy void, and FPL has evolved into this massive entity where they'll get 7 million people, and it's not so much a close knit community as people shouting into the void at times. But that's the Premier League fantasy. That's the Premier League. It's massive. It's bigger than the Championship. It's watched overseas, and the fantasy game is played by people overseas, by millions around the world. Gaffr isn't quite that at the moment, although we have managers worldwide. Shout out to David Strom from Norway.
And a certain person who won Gaffr, I think, was.
And of course, yes, we weren't going to mention him again in this video, but
Rune
is he Norwegian as well? Maybe it's a Scandinavian thing.
I'm looking forward to hearing him on the Championship Fantasy Pod at some point before the start of the season, just to put a voice to the name, so to speak, and hear about his perspective on the rivalry that we had, or at least I felt like we had a rivalry. Maybe he didn't, because I don't think he's quite as engaged on Twitter, but I'm intrigued to listen to that, I have to say.
So yeah, shout out to Alfred as well, who I think is only 18, but was very committed to Gaffr last season and finished a very respectable position. I think he was 6th overall.
I think.
Was he 4th? He was in the top 10 for the majority of the season. It's these Scandinavians. We need to keep out. Look out for them. They'll be high up in the leaderboard next season, I'm sure. It must be in the blood to be good at fantasy games and be from Norway or Sweden, we'll hunt them down next season with the help. I'm hoping with the help of Joel on this channel, and I'm hoping to be one of the few that is a content producer and also good at the fantasy game that they create content for. Whatever that might be in the top 1%, in the top 0.5% of all players. But I've enlisted the help of Joel for the Gaffr tapes. It's very much a joint venture, but if you want to get involved in streaming, please let me know, because there are 46 game weeks to cover, and I'd like to do deadline streams and score updates if possible, as well as these planning videos that me and Joel will be doing, looking at fixtures, stats, and our own teams, and talking through our decisions. So I think that rounds up this video. Thanks for watching the second and the first, the second video and the first stream. We got going eventually with the help of Joel. And we're hoping to run these much smoothly and get more people on board in the chat. In future planning videos on the Gaffr tapes. So thanks guys for watching, and stay involved in the community. And I hope to speak to you all at some point over the season.
See you soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye.